Have you ever wondered why plugging into a Marshall with a Les Paul still doesn't give you that true Slash sound? Well, that's because it's just the start. And it turns out that there's a handful of must-have pieces, even down to the plectrum, that can make all the difference. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 10 pieces of gear that matter the most, from the absolute essentials to the clever little extras that'll finally help you unlock that iconic Slash sound. Now, I'm not going to be talking about every single piece of gear that Slash has ever used, because sometimes, for example, like his fuzz pedal, he only uses that on a couple of songs. So I've left that out of this video. Same with reverb and delays. I've left those out because I think if you're recording something, you can put those in post and save yourself a little bit of money on your pedal board. And they're kind of the obvious things. I kind of wanted to talk about the stuff that not a lot of people mention, and they're actually the core of Slash's tone. And there's a link to everything in the description. So let's have a look at the obvious first, the guitar choice. Slash has over 400 guitars in his collection, and he experimented with lots of vintage style guitars of different kinds when he was recording the Use Your Illusion albums. For example, he used a Flying V on Knocking on Heaven's Door, and most of you probably recognize this, the BC Rich Mockingbird, which is famous for You Could Be Mine and also Sucker Train Blues, Velvet Revolver song. But if you picture Slash, chances are he's holding a Les Paul. And he's quite loyal, actually, because in fact, he used one specific Les Paul for the majority of the Appetite for Destruction album, and that same guitar has been on each one of his albums ever since. And there's a few things that are quite unique about that guitar that I'll talk about in a bit, and it suits his style of playing and music perfectly. But here's where most people fall into the same trap that I did. I used to think tone was all about the guitar, so I saved up and bought a Les Paul, but I only had about 200 quid left for an amp, so I just bought whatever I could within that price range, and it just never sounded like I wanted it to. It turns out the sound of a guitar, or the overall characteristic of the guitar tone that we're hearing, is a little bit the guitar and a lot the amp. And each amp has its own characteristic. And Slash's tone isn't just about the guitar, it's about the Marshall that it's plugged into. But not just any Marshall, because again, each Marshall has its own characteristic as well. If you want that iconic Appetite for Destruction sound, it came from a modified 1959 style Marshall head, which had extra gain. But when that amp was unfortunately lost, he switched to a JCM 800, again with modifications for even more gain. And if you're after that Use Your Illusion or Snake Pit sound, the modded JCM 800 with extra overdrive and mid boost gets you right in the ballpark. Now, if you have a stock 800, you could add some gain with an overdrive pedal and maybe an EQ pedal to boost the mids, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Basically, nothing too modern. Slash's tone was kind of built around the classic Marshall tones, just with a little bit more gain. But for live tones, Slash used the Marshall Silver Jubilee for a long time, but just know that that amp needs to be cranked a lot, otherwise it can get a little bit fizzy at lower volumes. And you might know that Slash has moved to Magnatone amps now, and they sound great from what I've heard, but I'm after that classic 90s Slash tone, because that's my absolute favourite. But amps are just the first part of the puzzle. Even with the right head and cab, the speakers inside can make or break that tone. And I really had no idea how much of a difference the speaker would make. There's a lot of info around the types of cabs and speakers that Slash used. It sits between two kinds, the Celestion Greenbacks and Vintage 30 speakers. Now, I think for a lot of the early stuff, from what it sounds like to me, it sounds like in the studio he's using greenback speakers, and they give you that sort of vintage bite. But also on the clean stuff, there's a little bit of breakup that the greenback speakers give you. They kind of go into that overdrive a little bit earlier than the vintage 30s. Quite heavily documented that Slash uses vintage 30s when playing live, and all his kind of signature amps come with vintage 30 speakers in, so they must be his favourite. And those vintage 30s seem to give you a little bit of a creamier sound, whereas the greenbacks are a little bit more overdriven. My advice though is I think everybody's got in their head their favourite Slash tone, and people are listening in different ways. A lot of people are chasing that Tokyo live tone, but me personally, I like the studio versions of all his stuff. So I really like that distinctive tone of Use Your Illusion albums and the Appetite for Destruction albums. There's something about them. Just try them. See which is your favourite. So quick mic tip, use 2 mics, because I could never get that Slash tone with just one microphone. It lacked that low mid punch. So I've got 2 microphones, I've got an SM57 and a kick drum mic to capture that low end frequency, so then you just blend the two together. For years, I played a stock Les Paul with the original pickups and it sounded great. But the moment I swapped in Slash's signature pickups, the tone was instantly there, especially that mid-range chime that Slash is famous for. Most of the time, I use the Seymour Duncan Slash signature series. Now, the APH2, the original ones, or the 2.0 are the way to go. They sound incredible. Now, the 2.0 are basically just a little bit more output, exactly the same. I use the 2.0s in the Mockingbird just because it's not as thick sounding as a Les Paul. So it just needs that little bit of extra output. Now, you could use the standard Seymour Duncan Alnico 2 pickups, but what's interesting is Slash liked the tone that he was getting from his Chris Derrig guitar, the one I talked about earlier. Pickups back in the day weren't all wound exactly the same. So what Seymour Duncan did was developed the Slash pickups to be exactly the same as the ones in his Chris Derrig. That's why these are my go-to. And people say just get the standard ones, but these are kind of tuned in to that Slash tone. Alternatively, if you have a guitar that is even less output than a Les Paul, or you want a little bit of extra something, they do the Slash 3.0. I did a video all about it, you can see it up here. But basically, they are Alnico 5 magnets. So a little bit more of a modern tone, but still got that Slash essence, and they really do. They've got all the characteristics of that Slash tone, built for thinner sounding guitars to just give them a little bit more oomph. So I use them in my Epiphone Les Paul here, and they sound phenomenal. It's changed that guitar to the point where I'm going to use it a lot more now because it's got the exact sound that I want. So if you like the sound of your guitar, but it's just lacking something, it's not got that Slash essence, pickups could be the missing piece. It definitely was for me. Now, all of these things, when it comes to Slash's tone, it's not one thing that's going to get you there. The amp and the guitar are going to be the main things, but then everything else, like the pickups, they're that extra sort of 10%, 5%, 2%, those little things that just get you closer and closer to the tone that you're looking for. So now let me show you something that most people don't really give that much thought to, the strings. Slash is all about 11 gauge strings. I also use them for years. Great for tone, but you need serious hand strength. But these days I've switched to 10s because I don't play every day anymore. I don't practice like I used to. I find that if I've not played for a few days or a week, going to 11s, I find it a little bit tricky sometimes. If you are playing every day, I think 11s are the way to go, to be honest. Is there a difference in tone? Honestly, there's probably a little bit, I will say, but it's very small. 10s are just a little bit brighter, I find, but that's an easy fix with your EQ on your amp. Thing is, like, if it makes me play better, then I'll take that any day over a tiny bit of tone. I use Ernie Ball strings. They're reliable, and the coated ones, the Slash edition ones, last a bit longer, especially if you sweat a lot and there's build-up of grime on there. If you're struggling with heavy strings, don't stress, because 10s are going to get you there, and they feel good. You don't have to go to the gym 7 days a week to be able to bend They're not, 11s aren't that bad, to be fair. You get used to them pretty quick. It's just, I think it's the frequency that you play that is going to make the difference with those. But even if you've got the perfect strings, there's one tiny piece of gear that can completely sabotage your tone if you get it wrong. Last week, I went to Anderton's testing this amp actually, but before I got my guitar out the boot of the car, the sales guy handed me a custom shop Les Paul and a thin plectrum. And I started playing and it was a disaster. The tone was really weak and my playing felt sloppy and I just couldn't get any control. The pick is an absolute game changer. And I knew this already because I used to work in a music shop and I tried every single plectrum that they sold on the hunt to find the perfect one. And I quickly realized which one that was. If you want to get that slash tone and the attack, you need a Dunlop Tortex 1.14mm. And that extra thickness gives you the control and the punch that you need. You just can't get that with a floppy pick. Now once you've got the basics dialed in, it's time to add a little bit of seasoning, and this is where it gets fun. Now some of Slash's solos just wouldn't be the same without a wah pedal. Now he's got a couple of signature Dunlop Crybaby models, but personally I really like the Crybaby 535Q because it's got a little bit more tone shaping options and a boost function for solos which keeps the gain nice and creamy so you don't lose any output or sustain when you press on the pedal, which can happen with wahs. Now I've tried the Slash signature wah pedal. It looks cool, sounds great, but honestly it kind of disappeared a little bit in the mix. It was lacking the higher end mid frequencies that need to punch through. I think they've re-released the 535Q recently and I think that's got an LED on it, so keep an eye out for that one. Now if you've been chasing that Use Your Illusion tone for years, this next pedal is the secret sauce. It's crucial for Use Your Illusion tones, but it's also a huge part of the Appetite for Destruction sound as well. And that pedal is the Crybaby Q Zone. And when I got this, it changed everything. I realized where that tone had been hiding. But here's the catch. It's not one of those set and forget pedals. You have to tweak it for different songs and every mix, because one setting won't work for everything. Now, I've got a full video coming on how to dial in the Q Zone pedal just right. So press subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Plus, I'll be updating my course with new settings from my modded JCM 800 amp and my Tonex presets as well. So keep an eye out for that. Now the thing is, even with just this pedal into a JCM 800 amp, there's still some shaping you might need to do. Around the sort of Guns N' Roses era, a lot of bands were using the same amps because they were so great, but guitarists wanted to find their own unique sound. And that's where an EQ pedal comes in handy, because it's perfect for sculpting the sound and making sure you cut through a mix live or in the studio. Now, if you're after that live Tokyo tone, the Boss GE7 equalizer pedal that's the kind of go-to for that tone. But if you're after that Use Your Illusion tone and maybe a little bit more versatility, I highly recommend the MXR 10-band EQ pedal. You can just tame the top end a little bit and boost or cut the mids, just like Slash. You can get that warmth of Slash's tone. You can even add a little bit of extra sizzle for the solos or bite for that pick attack. But there's another secret weapon hiding in Slash's rig that most people overlook, and I can see why, but it's absolutely essential for those classic album tones. Jeez. I used to think the Talkbox, sorry, this isn't the way. I used to think the Talkbox was a bit of a gimmick, a little bit too much hassle with all the setup. But then I had an idea for a riff that just needed that sound. So I actually tried the new MXR Talkbox, and it's actually a lot of fun. So it's basically a pedal on the ground with a built-in amp and speaker, and that speaker has a tube attached to it which goes up this microphone stand and sits alongside this microphone. And what happens is the speaker pushes the sound through that tube so you can actually hear it. And you put that in your mouth, and then the microphone picks up the sound coming out of the tube and through your mouth. If you've got the little bit of extra budget and you've got the space to set all this up, then it's definitely worth it. But here's the final truth. Now I know that I said there was only 10. You can have every piece of gear on this list and still not sound anything like Slash if you miss this last piece. And that's technique, because gear gets you close, but technique is everything. And that's why I built this channel, and it's why I created the How to Play Like Slash course, because once you know the tricks, achieving that elusive sound is actually a lot easier than you think. So if you want to go beyond the gear and master the style, check out the rest of the channel, subscribe for more, or hit the links below to dive straight into the course. I hope you enjoyed these tips. Let me know which one was your favorite. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one.